Hi everyone, welcome. I got a bin over here that I'm preparing to feed. It's the bin of guest worms, if you want to refer to them that way, because I guess the condition I had laid out when I had originally launched off this bin was that, these worms came from the outdoor compost barrel, quite a few of them, and I didn't want to leave the outdoor compost barrel crippled with too few worms, so I thought that if, it became necessary to restock the number of worms in my compost barrel, then that's what these worms would be for. But I was even in there earlier today throwing some stuff in, and I saw tons and tons of worms already. So I just have this feeling that keeping these worms around down here in my wormery as just part of my herd, or whatever the right word for it is, then I don't think we're going to be robbing the compost barrel outside of any sort of capability or anything like that. So let's see if I can disassemble what's going on here a little bit more gracefully than how it's starting, because this piece of paper has a huge tear through it now, right down to the middle of it at this point. But you know what? We're always up for a good challenge when it comes to the durability of our top covering pieces of paper. So although it seems to have a huge detriment at this point with that big tear in it, we're going to stick with it, and we'll cover up with it at the end. This piece of coffee filter, however, it's what's been placed down here in the middle to indicate to ourselves where we last fed the bin, although I have no reason to feed anywhere other than the middle, because that's typically my routine. But I've got a bunch of stuff here, a variety of things that are and are not frozen, stuff that came out of my freezer, other things that were just part of a grapefruit that I just had for breakfast, and there's also the coffee out of the machine. And you know what? We're going to go ahead and use this piece of paper here as bedding in the feeding area, because we've got a brand new coffee filter to indicate to ourselves where we last fed. This last feeding of this system was almost 2 weeks ago, 13 days to be exact. And at that time they were fed a pretty generous portion. But 13 days kind of makes me wonder what the deal might be. Some of the stuff had been cooked. It was the veggies that were placed into a soup to give it a good yummy flavor, but it wasn't like the carrots and some of those other veggies that you end up leaving in the soup because they're good to eat. It was stuff that, produces a really yummy flavor, but maybe its consistency is not ideal for consumption within the soup, so it usually gets pulled out, and that's part of what they were given last time. So usually I don't give them stuff that's been cooked. Usually the stuff that my worms get has been frozen, because that freezing process and then the subsequent thawing has that effect of breaking the cell walls of the food items and kind of accelerating the breakdown process or jump-starting the breakdown process. So and I guess it also makes storage of the foods intended for the worms a little easier too, because it's not just sitting somewhere at room temperature starting into the decomposition process. It's kind of frozen in time, literally, I guess, in terms of its breakdown process from when you placed it into the deep freeze. So I mounted up a whole bunch of nice leaves over here, leaves that have been in the system for some time now, and I've also got a number of I got a couple extra coffee filters, I got some used napkins, paper towels, things like that, stuff I'd like to use as extra bedding in here, as well as some of the seasoned stuff, because to me it seems like all this awesome leafy matter sitting out on the surface, including all of its sticks and stems, being a little bit dry like that doesn't really help it get anywhere in terms of the breakdown process, so I'd really like to submerge all that stuff. We could even sprinkle a little fresh leafy material out onto the top. But this stuff that's been in the bin for a while, I think it's just a hop, skip, and a jump away from not even being bedding so much, but probably more food anymore. So I don't know, this feels to me like kind of an unusual excavation method that I embarked on here. They were mounted up all this loose stuff on the sides. Then I proceeded into the opening up of the feeding area, much wider than I normally would. Oh, finally bumping into something here. What do we got? Ah, okay. This was a pretty good sized piece of cantaloupe. It was like the end of it cut off. And it also seems to me like there might even be a little bit of that, see the green? I don't know if it's visible or not. And it's got a good amount of thickness. There's like, you know, almost 1/8 of an inch, or maybe even 1/8 of an inch of thickness on this remaining. So this has not been nibbled down yet, oddly enough, after almost 2 weeks. 13 days to be precise. But I didn't see anything else. Any of those large chunks of soup veggies, the cooked stuff. Like I would imagine that a piece of cooked vegetable would be pretty easy for the worms to devour. But sometimes it makes me wonder if they're just maybe not turned on by this stuff so much because, I don't know, I thought you kind of like eradicate all the nutritional value out of things by cooking them, is why there's such a big emphasis on eating things raw, because you haven't cooked away all the nutritional value or whatever. You know, I've got some information written on the board, and one of the things that I brought down here as far as facts and figures about this system somehow strikes me as possibly being flawed or faulty. Look at this. This is the stem of a banana. So we've now found 2 pieces of leftovers, but not a lot if you think about it, really. But I thought I felt some other things in here. Might just be bedding bits. Or another chunk of banana peel. Perhaps just the stem again. Yeah, there was like maybe 4 or 5 good-sized chunks of that soup vegetable. Obviously a couple banana peels, that piece of cantaloupe. I don't even remember, maybe there was coffee and worm chow, but things like that you would not expect to find leftovers of. I'm just kind of plowing and rummaging through to see what else I can locate as far as leftovers go, but I think I've pretty much fished out the majority of it. That's notable and recognizable. And these poor worms, they're probably like, what the heck is going on here? Totally turned this whole feeding area up on its ear. So why don't we just proceed to giving them the food that we allotted for them here today. Some of it's frozen, so I kind of like the idea of having something laying down underneath them to cushion any worms right below from the exceedingly cold stuff coming in, although not everything's frozen. So we'll start in by trying to utilize some of this paper towel and napkin and whatnot that's over here. These coffee filters even have a good bit of the coffee remaining in them too. So let's tear these up as well. Or, well, yeah, just wondering if I can tear more than one at a time. I guess my pause was just like, am I going to end up embarrassing myself because I can't do it? It's funny though, it reminds me of a video I was watching. It was like this challenge video saying, you know, take a piece of paper. No, it started out as like, take a $20 bill, and if you could fold it 10 times, then you can keep it. But like by the time the guy got to like the 6th time or whatever, he had folded it, you know, once, twice, 3, 4, 5. At some point, he just got to the point where he couldn't fold it anymore. So I never realized that, you know, by the time you fold something 10 times, you can't even get to that point. It's not possible to. So then they went to tissue paper, they went to something even thinner, and that couldn't even get there. Maybe he got one extra fold out of the deal with the thinner material. So that's a really, I didn't realize I had so much paper here. So we can even save some of it to go in with some of these leaves, but I want to start diversifying here. Another thing I want to include here, oops, it's some of my BTI solution. At this point, the BTI, this mosquito dunks solution, is something that has made its way into all of my systems at this point. So in this particular system, it would already be, I guess, its 2nd application. You know, it's just a solution within water, so I'd really like to soak all this paper with this stuff. From the worm's perspective, there's nothing going on here that they even sense or know is there. It's just a bacteria within the BTI that interferes with larval development of mosquitoes and fruit flies and stuff, gnats. So that's really the result that I'm after by putting this stuff in. And I'm really keeping my fingers crossed. So let's get some of these older bits back into service before we bring in the new. Let's see what we got here. think I'm just going to dump it. And then we can examine what we've given them. I've still got some coffee to sprinkle in. We can give them some worm chow. So here's part of the breakfast. Just me being particular about peeling off the parts of the grapefruit that I don't like. I just like that inner piece of it. Some more citrus. And what else do we have here? Here's some potato peel. So far, stuff that maybe the worms aren't going to get too excited about, but this is something they should really enjoy here, right? These peelings of cucumber. There's even some other veggies here, some other soup bits. I'm not even sure how I ended up with this assortment, but it looks pretty interesting and tasty, at least if I was a worm. So we can start integrating some more paper here. I guess it always makes good sense to break the stuff up. What a colorful feeding. Don't worry, next time we come in here, it's all going to be the same color, pretty much brown, right? And you know what? This coffee, before we put the coffee in, why don't we, before we cover up the food from the worm's perspective is stuff that they could probably break down a little bit more easy if they've got the availability of grit nearby. The grit that I'm using is pulverized eggshell. Any sort of rock dust or crustacean shell pulverized into a fine powdery consistency, anything like that could be used by the worms as grit. Just kind of like blending in a variety of different things in here, but before I put that coffee in, I'd really like to just grab one handful of my pre-made bedding over here, just so the coffee doesn't go in a mound. It's stuff that I'd prefer to kind of combine with other things. Just seems like it gives the coffee a little bit of a increased chance at being consumed if it's combined with a whole bunch of nice bedding nearby. I'm trying to think if there's anything else we need to put in here. We can give them a little dose of my worm chow, stuff that I probably got to make a little bit more of at this point soon, because it seems like I'm running a little bit low. The worms really seem to be taking to this stuff. It seems to be working quite nicely, so I feel pretty comfortable being generous with it. But this feeding in general is pretty good in size, so I don't think we need to go too nuts or overboard. But if we end up having another 12 or 14 day pause between feedings here, it might not hurt to be generous so we don't have to sweat the availability of food for these little guys. Now, one thing I noticed when I checked out the video from our last check-in 13 days ago was that we didn't really inspect the outer edges of the system. We kind of just went straight for the middle where we knew the previous feeding had been, checked it out, added the feeding that they received, but the outer edges of the bin somehow got neglected. We never even took a peek down on the edges, so I figured before we wrap things up here today, maybe we'll just take a quick dive down into the outer edges just to see how things look. I suspect that they're going to look fine. Hopefully we're not in for any surprises, so let's just... Holy cow. What the heck? I thought we had a lot of worms down where the food had been placed, but here, this is really crazy. Alright, I got to get the board out, because I'm really quite skeptical. So bullet number one, right? The estimated count, or the estimated number of worms being 928 in this bin. I seriously doubt that that's correct. Especially after you like encounter swarms of worms in a particular spot like this. I mean, there are lots and lots of worms here, and you know, it's not surprising, I'm sure, for me to tell you that there's lots and lots of castings here too. It's pretty much all castings. Kind of makes you wonder, what the heck are the worms doing there? Wouldn't they want like some fresh bedding to hang out in? Jeez Louise, look at this. This is insane. Could probably launch off 2 compost barrels outside with this many worms. You know what? I feel like it just has to be done. I gotta just sprinkle in some bedding over here, you know, to be combined with this casting collection, because there's so many worms there. They need it. I mean, don't they? this really can't hurt in my mind, what we're doing there. I think it can only help. Really makes me curious now what the heck we're going to find on the other edge. Wow, that was fun. That is cool. That's kind of the fun part of doing this stuff, because so many times you encounter these kind of unexpected situations, and then you're just sort of taken aback and you're really amazed. And it really makes you wonder, what the heck is it about these little creatures that's just so darn amazing? Alright, one last quick glance down into this edge of the bin, and it almost makes me wonder, could it have something to do with one of my theories about worm density in my bins pertaining to just the general temperature on one end of the bin or the other? So like the theory in the winter was that, you know, this side of the bin, opposite of where the label is, right? The side that's got the label on it is the side that faces into the room so that I can see it. And the side with no label on it is the one that's up against the wall, where a little bit of the cool winter air tends to sneak in. And maybe the coolness was driving them away, or the warmth was attracting them. But there can't be much more than a degree or two difference. And at this point, we're in the thick of spring, and we're getting warmer and warmer days. And I don't really feel the need to keep things warm. I had the window open. I'm in short sleeves. I'm in short pants. So there's really no coldness, frigidity. There's no reason to worry about cold down here. But maybe there's just enough of it going on here that the worms are sensing it, or perhaps even a more realistic way to look at it is that maybe it's got nothing to do with temperature, but still, the one consistent thing is the wall. So something about one side and the other. I'm going to try something, and if we don't forget, well, we won't forget because we'll be reminded. I'll be putting this back up on the shelf, oriented just the opposite. So instead of the label being in, facing the room so we can see it clearly, I'm going to put this thing back up on the shelf with the label inwards, facing the wall. And then maybe now that side that's up against the wall will become depopulated. Maybe we'll find them all over on the opposite side, on the side that's now facing into the room. So, I don't know. Interesting. There again, might have nothing to do with temperature, but it might actually have something to do with that wall. I really don't know what's causing it. But that was fun, you gotta admit. Alright everyone, thanks for watching. This is the end of the video. I've got a little bit of cleaning up and putting away to do, but I'm not going to bore you with that because that's boring. But before I go, let me just really quickly say thank you. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, as always, please don't forget to leave me a quick thumbs up before you go. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel. Alright everyone, have a great day. Thanks for watching.